Thank you. I want to start this presentation by talking about how we've been trained. And yes, I use the word train quite deliberately, although other more educated psychologists and the like might choose a word like conditioning. I would use a word like that if it didn't always make me think of what my daughters always seem to be doing with their hair. So you see, we're trained from a very early age to do things in certain ways, and these early trainings become so fixed in us that, well, just like a well-trained dog, we stick by them for the rest of our lives without ever questioning whether we really wanted to fetch a stick in the first place. Just like our dogs, we assume our trainers know better than we do. Now, of course, some of this training is really full of wisdom. Take being taught to go to the lavatory. It's quite useful in society to know where to wee and poo. It really wouldn't be that great as grown-ups to be walking around with massive nappies on. Equally, being taught to eat with a knife and fork as opposed to our hands, or to drink tea from a cup or mug instead of drinking straight from the teapot, we never question that it's right, we just learn how to do it. And that's probably a good thing, particularly if we ever get invited for a bit of afternoon tea or supper with Her Madge the Queen. So, by the time we get to kindergarten, we're already pretty adept at following instructions, and, as importantly, we're also very, very trusting in those who seem to know the great secrets of life, adults. Now, a fascinating thing happens when we go to school. And this thing that happens in school lives with us throughout our adult lives, as I've seen at workshops and adult classes over the years. At ages as early as 3 years old, we start to be trained in how to deal with problems. I remember one of the first questions I was ever asked in kindergarten. It was on my very first day, probably only about a couple of minutes into the morning. It was posed by Miss Crowther, my rather scary tweed-skirted early years trainer. "Okay now, boys, so who likes to drink milk?" The room was filled with the desperate calls of little boys. Now, boys, have your parents not taught you how to answer questions properly? We keep quiet and we put our hands up. So I'll ask the question again, who likes milk?" This time every hand went up in the room and silence prevailed. Well, as much silence as was possible in a room of impossibly scared and excited 4-year-olds. The questions came thick and fast after that, but there were different types of questions. Questions like, what country do we live in? And what's the name of the Queen's oldest son? Less hands went up each time now. I remember feeling full of pride and excitement when I knew the answer and could put my hand up, but terrified and embarrassed if I didn't. On that first morning, my training in dealing with problems had begun, and I must say it was jolly effective. Well, maybe less of the jolly and more of the effective. I developed razor-sharp reactions to be the first in answering questions in subjects I was really confident in, and equally adept at making myself invisible when asked about stuff about which I knew nothing. And I think my friends did all pretty much the same thing too. And I think children all over the world do pretty much the same today. They jump in when they think they have the answer to something, and they try to hide if they haven't. Now you see, this is very powerful training in how to respond to what I'd call linear problems. Let me define a linear problem as I see it for you. In early school, a linear problem might be something like, spell the word cat. The problem has one answer. You can score a gold star by spelling out the letters C-A-T. A linear problem in life might be something like a car running out of petrol. You solve the problem in one way, simply by filling it up with gas. Linear problems are easy to spot because they have a clear solution. Day after day, in those first few incredibly powerful years of life, we're being reminded that the way to react to situations is to stick our hands up, to fix, or pretend we're not there, and withdraw. However, as we grow, a different type of problem or situation starts to emerge. These problems are very different to the ones we're used to, although no one ever bothers to tell us this. They're different because they involve our emotions and specifically our relationships. And problems that involve our relationships don't tend to be linear by nature. In fact, we often respond to deep-seated problems in relationships by attacking the problem which has occurred in the present moment. This approach is rarely helpful and often serves only to continue to cover up the issue that may really need addressing. So now, as we move into adolescence, We find ourselves getting into rows with parents or relationship problems with friends. And what tools do we have to deal with these issues? Well, years of training have taught us that when a situation arises, we should fix it or withdraw from it. So, when adults try to talk to teenagers about something about which they're unhappy, is it any surprise that we see our teenagers becoming silent, interrupting, or being abusive? Is it any surprise that they lock themselves in their bedroom with their iPods on full blast, or storm out of the front door in the middle of winter wearing just a t-shirt and jeans? They're only doing what they've been trained brilliantly by their trainers to do for years, reacting, using the modes of fix or withdraw. And of course it doesn't stop there. You see, we were those teenagers, and we've become even more skilled at jumping in with our fixes for problems or running away from anything we can't handle. Our marriages, our relationships, our parenting, our businesses, our financial system and governments, the list goes on and on. Look for examples on both a local and global scale of where man has applied the reaction of fix or withdraw, and you'll find them everywhere, including their consequences. Our communication forms the basis for all our relationships and business interactions. Our communications are the oil that enables the engine to run smoothly. Most significant issues both in life and in business are of a non-linear nature, and yet we are using a linear model to deal with them. We used to have a linear view of the world until we found out it wasn't flat after all. We're using the equivalent of glue instead of oil in our engine, and it is gumming up the works. Every day, billions of dollars are being ploughed into global communication. Instant messaging, texting, emails, video conferencing, all amazing tools that have been created to help facilitate communication with anyone, anywhere in the world. We're communicating globally more than any other time in history. But whilst we make the great leap forwards in technology, are we really doing anything to improve how we communicate? The need for effective and balanced communication has never been greater. With many of these technologies taking out of the equation the invaluable emotional interaction that takes place between two people sharing a physical space, it has become even more important to have a communication system that supports our relationships rather than weakens them. We need a system of communicating that questions the very problem itself. An easy-to-follow methodology that drills down into the presenting issue to draw out the very essence of the situation that we're faced with, so that we can see whether we are really seeking to answer the right question. A communication system that is in harmony with the real meaning of education itself, to lead out of. And if we are to apply such a model successfully, we need to be educated in why it is we currently react as we do when faced with difficult situations in life. Thanks very much for listening.